"This baby isn't yours," my wife said, standing in our kitchen with her arms crossed, waiting for me to fall apart. I just smiled. That's not the reaction she wanted. She wanted tears or rage or begging. Instead, I picked up my coffee mug and took a sip like she told me it might rain later. My name is Thomas Whitfield. I'm 34 and my wife Rachel is 31. We live in a quiet suburb outside Nashville, Tennessee, married for 5 years and 8 months into a pregnancy I've been counting down every single day. "Did you hear me?" Rachel asked, her voice cracking slightly, thrown off by my calm. "I heard you," I said. Before she could say anything else, headlights swept across our driveway. A car door slammed. Rachel's face went from defiant to terrified in less than 3 seconds. "That's not supposed to be him," she whispered. Our front door opened without a knock. A man I recognized instantly from old photos, Daniel, Rachel's ex-boyfriend from before we met, walked into our living room like he had every right to be there. "Rachel," he said, breathless. I couldn't wait outside anymore. I had to tell him myself. "Tell me what?" I asked. Daniel looked at me, then at Rachel's rounded belly, then back at me. "She never told you the real reason we broke up 7 years ago." I set my coffee mug down slowly. "I'm listening." Rachel sat down hard on our couch, burying her face in her hands. "Daniel, don't," she said. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Daniel said. "He deserves to know why you panicked and accused him of something you don't even believe, just because I showed up unannounced." I looked between them, piecing together fragments. "Someone explain what's actually happening right now," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding harder than I let show. Daniel took a breath. 7 years ago, Rachel and I were engaged, not just dating. Engaged, 3 months from a wedding date. I broke it off because I found out something about my own health, a genetic condition running through my father's side of the family, early onset Huntington's disease. I panicked. I told her I couldn't put her through watching me deteriorate someday, and I left before she could argue with me. Rachel's shoulders were shaking now, silent tears falling. "I didn't know that," I said quietly. "Rachel never told me any of this." "Because I promised him I never would," Rachel said, lifting her head. "He asked me never to tell anyone the real reason, so his family wouldn't be treated differently once word got out. I respected that for 7 years." "So why is this relevant tonight?" I asked. "Why did seeing him walk through our door make you accuse me of not being this baby's father?" Rachel closed her eyes. "Because 3 weeks ago, I found out that condition can sometimes affect fertility in men who carry the gene, and I panicked when Daniel texted me last week saying he needed to talk. I convinced myself somehow in a spiral of anxiety that maybe something had happened years ago that I couldn't explain now. Some impossible scenario my brain built out of fear, not fact." I stared at her, trying to understand the mechanics of a panic I'd never witnessed in 5 years of marriage. "You accuse me of not being the father of our child because of anxiety about a conversation you hadn't even had yet?" "I know how insane it sounds," Rachel whispered. "I haven't been sleeping. The hormones, the fear about labor next month, and then Daniel texting out of nowhere after 7 years of silence. I spiraled, Thomas. I said something cruel and untrue because I was terrified of something completely unrelated." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "I only came tonight because I'm getting tested next week. Finally, after years of avoiding it. I wanted to tell Rachel in person, as a friend, since she was the only person who ever really understood what I was going through. I had no idea she'd twist that into believing something about your baby." I walked to the window, needing a moment before responding to either of them. Outside, our neighborhood looked exactly the same as it had 20 minutes earlier, quiet, ordinary, completely unaware that our living room had just become the center of 7 years of hidden grief. "Rachel," I said, turning back around, "I need you to understand something. What you said to me, before any explanation, cut deeper than almost anything anyone has ever said to me. Pregnancy hormones or not, anxiety or not, those words don't just disappear because there's a reason behind them." "I know," she said, voice barely audible. "I know. And I'm sorry doesn't feel like enough right now." Daniel cleared his throat. "I should go. This wasn't fair of me either, showing up unannounced right before you two needed to have this conversation privately." "Wait," I said, surprising myself. "Before you leave, I need to ask you something directly." Daniel nodded. "Are you and Rachel in contact regularly? Is there something happening between you two that I should actually be worried about?" No, Daniel said immediately. I promise you, no. Rachel has been one of the only people who never treated me differently after my diagnosis. Fear started. We talk maybe twice a year, mostly about my health anxiety, nothing more. I came tonight because facing a genetic test alone terrified me, and old habits made me reach out to the one person who understood that fear years ago. I studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. I found none, just a man carrying his own private terror, badly timed with mine. Okay, I said finally, I believe you. Daniel left quietly a few minutes later, leaving Rachel and me alone in a living room that suddenly felt too large. I need you to actually talk to someone, I said, sitting down across from her. Not me, a professional. What happened tonight wasn't just stress, Rachel. That was a genuine break from rational thought. And I need to understand if this is something bigger than pregnancy hormones. Rachel nodded slowly. I've been having thoughts I don't recognize as mine for weeks now. Convinced you were pulling away emotionally, even though you weren't. Convinced something felt wrong with the pregnancy, even though every appointment says otherwise. Tonight wasn't really about Daniel at all. It was the loudest version yet of something I've been quietly drowning in. For the first time since I'd walked into that kitchen, I felt real fear. Not about paternity, but about my wife's mental state during the most vulnerable stretch of her pregnancy. The next morning, Rachel called her OBGYN before I even finished making coffee. Within 2 days, she was diagnosed with severe prenatal anxiety, compounded by an undiagnosed thyroid imbalance that had been quietly worsening for months, something that can genuinely distort thinking, trigger irrational fears, and create exactly the kind of panic-driven accusation she'd thrown at me that night. It didn't erase what she'd said, but it explained it in a way that let both of us breathe again. We started weekly sessions with a therapist who specialized in prenatal mental health. Some appointments were harder than others. Rachel cried through most of the first 3, apologizing over and over for words she said she couldn't fully explain even to herself. You don't have to keep apologizing, I told her during week 4. I need you to focus on getting better, not on earning forgiveness I already gave you the moment I understood what was actually happening in your mind. Daniel, true to his word, got tested 2 weeks later. The results came back negative. No Huntington's gene. 7 years of quiet terror finally lifted. He sent Rachel one final text, thanking her for being the only person who never made him feel broken during the worst years of his life, then respectfully stepped back from any further contact, understanding that continued communication, even innocent, wasn't fair to either of us moving forward. Rachel's thyroid medication started working within 3 weeks. The anxiety didn't disappear completely. Pregnancy is hard enough without added complications, but it became manageable, understandable, something we faced together instead of something that ambushed us in our own living room. Our daughter, Everly, was born 5 weeks later, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with my nose and Rachel's stubborn chin, undeniable proof of exactly what both of us already knew that night in our kitchen. Holding her for the first time, I thought about how close we'd come to letting one terrifying, irrational sentence define an entire relationship. How easy it would have been to walk out that night, angry and hurt, without ever discovering the thyroid imbalance quietly poisoning my wife's rational thoughts for months. Rachel, still recovering in the hospital bed beside me, watched me hold our daughter with an expression I hadn't seen in weeks, pure, uncomplicated relief. "I'm sorry I ever made you doubt this moment," she whispered. "You didn't," I said, adjusting Everly gently in my arms. "You made me understand something about you I never knew I needed to understand. That's different." 6 months later, Rachel still attends therapy regularly. We talk openly now about mental health in ways we never did before, about the invisible battles hormones and undiagnosed conditions can create, about how easily fear can disguise itself as certainty when your body and mind are working against you. Daniel sent one card after Everly's birth, congratulating us both. No return address, no further contact expected or offered. Some chapters, we both agreed, deserve to stay closed with dignity rather than lingering unresolved. If you've ever said something in a moment of panic that you couldn't fully explain afterward, or if you've been on the receiving end of words that felt impossible to forgive, I hope our story reminds you of something important. Sometimes, the cruelest things people say aren't really about you at all. Sometimes they're the loudest warning sign of a battle happening quietly beneath the surface, one that deserves compassion and answers, not just immediate judgment. Everly is 9 months old now, laughing every time her father walks into a room, completely unaware of how close one panicked, misunderstood sentence came to changing the entire course of her family's story before she ever took her first breath.